Onto the polished marble of the reception hall dropped a scuffed, heavy metal toolkit. No ceremonial robes, no diplomatic offerings. Sola cataloged the rusted object with a rigid twitch of her mandibles, her stylus hovering over the official arrival manifest of Ethelgard. The Terran groom had finally arrived on Nyx. 3. The covenant-bound treaty required a union of flesh and presence, a symbolic cohabitation to seal the peace between the Xylos' hegemony and Terra. Alara Vaughn, standing rigid in her high-collared silk, expected a polished statesman. Kalen Thorne she received instead. He wore no rank insignia. His broad shoulders shifted beneath a worn canvas jacket that radiated an uncomfortable amount of mammalian body heat into the sterile, climate-controlled corridor. 2 fingers Sola tapped against her forearm, registering the severe insult. The Terrans had sent a lowly laborer to a noble house. What happened on Nyx 3 wasn't a battle. But you should listen closely, because survival rarely sounds like gunfire. For days past, for 96 hours, the new master of the estate performed 0 administrative duties. The ruined irrigation conduits in the western courtyard, Kalen watched in absolute silence. He did not touch the rusted machinery. He simply stood in the biting wind of the moon's early cycle, tracking the flow of leaking water with his pale eyes. He traced the invisible pressure lines. Incompetence, Sola logged in the daily registry. Then came the Baron. Valerius arrived on a private transport, his shuttle flanked by 2 heavily armed hegemony gunships. The political rival sought to exploit the Terrans' perceived weakness and dissolve the fragile treaty. Alara braced for a diplomatic bloodbath in the grand drawing room. "Did you bring the required pacification offerings for the dignitary?" Sola asked the Terran, presenting the silver ceremonial tray. Kalen merely hoisted the battered metal toolkit. "Things break," he replied, his voice a low gravel scrape. Sola froze, her internal temperature dropping. A threat of physical dismantling. She recorded the Terran's barbaric aggression, terrified of the raw violence he planned to unleash upon a visiting noble. Violence never materialized. Only a single, private conversation. Behind closed oak doors, the 2 men spoke for exactly 4 minutes. Out of the estate Valerius fled, his posture entirely collapsed, his mandibles clicking in erratic terror. The gunships broke orbit before the sun even set. Alara found her new partner back in the courtyard, a wrench finally in his hand, efficiently locking the repaired irrigation seals into place. The water flowed perfectly. He wiped engine grease on his canvas trousers. A biting frost crept over the stone tiles. Shivering, Sola pulled her thermal shawl tighter, logging the rapid ambient temperature drop of the incoming cold cycle. The frost formed intricate, harmless geometric patterns across Kalen's polished toolkit resting on the bench. Across the valley, the warning siren shrieked. A jagged, metallic scream shattered the evening quiet. The nearby processing refinery's sub-zero containment field had completely failed. Hundreds of Xylos workers were trapped inside. Piercing halogen floodlights cut through the blinding ice storm. Outside the primary processing bay stood Alara, her posture rigid against the unnatural freeze. Behind reinforced plasteel observation glass, 30 Xylos workers lay completely paralyzed. Their cold-blooded biology could not withstand the sudden sub-zero plunge. -40 degrees, a fatal threshold. Sola wiped condensation from her datapad screen, adjusting the tiny contrast dial. Down the freezing corridor echoed a heavy footfall. Into the chaos walked Kalen. He carried the battered toolkit. No powered armor protected him. No insulated thermal suit wrapped his mammalian frame. "The pressure locks," he rasped, staring directly at the blast doors. They froze shut, permanently. Rapid thermal contraction had warped the primary gear shafts. In the extreme cold, the dense metal shrank, biting into the locking mechanisms with thousands of pounds of pressure. Electronic override signals bounced back as dead failures. Physical torque alone could break the seal. Through the frosted glass, Sola spotted Varn. The young apprentice lay curled near the intake vent. Around his neck clung a frayed blue heating scarf, hand-woven by his mother. Jagged ice crystals were already forming on the boy's unblinking eyes. Without hesitation, the Terran stripped his heavy canvas jacket. He needed absolute mobility to squeeze into the narrow maintenance shaft. Exposed to the biting wind, his bare back came into full view. In sheer reflex, Sola flinched backward. Deep combat scarring cross-hatched his spine. Not clean weapon burns, but horrific structural lacerations. These were the permanent marks of crushed bulkheads, chemical fires, and ruptured conduits. "He is a keystone," Elara whispered, her formal, diplomatic tone cracking. Understanding slammed into Sola's mind. The 4 days of silent staring in the estate courtyard finally made sense. Laziness had never been the issue. Mechanically, he had been mapping Ethelgard's architectural weaknesses. Low-caste insults, the hegemony assumed they were. Now, watching Kalen shove his unprotected body into the freezing shaft, the true paradigm crystallized. Terra didn't send armed soldiers to uphold the treaty. They sent their elite architects of survival, the true operators of the Covenant bound. Into the sub-zero maintenance bay stepped the Terran. His bare hands shook violently from the killing cold. The primary release valve he gripped with raw fingers. He already knew the archaic machinery would violently resist. From his kit, he pulled a massive iron wrench. He wedged it firmly against the frozen gears. Metal shrieked against metal. Tendons in his forearms strained until they threatened to snap. He did not stop pulling. With a concussive crack, the ice shattered. The massive pressure locks violently disengaged. Warm air flooded the containment zone. 2 fingers Sola tapped against her forearm. The Sovereign Hegemony Council convened the next morning. Faced with the refinery logs, they voted unanimously to maintain the fragile peace treaty. Baron Valerius's pro-war faction dissolved into silence. Back at Ethelgard, the pale evening sun warmed the stone courtyard. The repaired irrigation conduits hummed steadily, carrying fresh water toward the western gardens. Kalen sat quietly on the low wall. Beside him rested the metal toolkit. Dark engine grease stained its heavy iron clasps. Melted frost pooled beneath it on the dry stone.